The diplomatic records from 2142 describe it as the moment the universe held its breath. The alien emperor's sneer echoed through the Grand Colosseum. Let the human child try. Then 12-year-old Leo Garrison rapped, his calloused hands around the 500-ton quantum-forged warhammer, and the titanium floorboards began to shatter. It is a matter of declassified historical record that humanity did not win the Orion War. For 6 grueling years, the United Nations Extrasolar Command threw everything it had against the sprawling military might of the Valyrian ascendancy. We lost the colony, worlds of Harvest, Reach, and New Geneva. In a matter of months, entire fleets, manufactured by Lockheed Martin's off-world division, were turned to slag. By the winter of 2142, Earth was blockaded, starving, and out of options. The Valyrian Emperor, a towering bioengineered warlord known simply as Emperor Kale, offered a single, humiliating path to survival: absolute and unconditional surrender to be signed in person on his throne world of Ethelgard. The human delegation dispatched to Ethelgard was deliberately small, a calculated insult. By the Emperor, leading the envoy was William Hayes, a seasoned diplomat, formerly of the United States State Department. Beside him stood General William Brooks, a man who had watched 3 of his own sons burn in the orbital defense of Mars. But the most controversial member of the delegation was not a soldier or a politician. It was a 12-year-old boy named Leo Garrison. To understand why a child was brought to the most critical diplomatic summit in human history, one must understand interstellar property law. The Valyrian ascendancy operated on strict archaic codes of conquest and blood right. The primary territory Emperor Kyle desired was the Typhon sector, a region rich in hyperdense minerals vital to their war machine. Legal mining rights to Typhon were held by the Garrison family, granted a century prior by a corporate charter from an old Earth conglomerate, with Leo's father, mother, and older siblings killed in the bombardment of the Typhon prime mining colony. Young Leo was the sole surviving heir under Valyrian law. The treaty transferring ownership of the sector was void unless the blood heir was present to witness the surrender. William Hayes had fought tooth and nail to keep the boy on Earth, arguing through secure subspace channels with the UN Secretary General, Richard Cole. You're sending a traumatized orphan into a lion's den, Richard Hayes had argued, the transcripts of which were released 50 years later under the Freedom of Information Act. The gravity on Ethelgard is 1.4 times that of Earth. The atmospheric pressure alone will make the boy bleed from his nose. Emperor Kyle is known for his psychological torture. He will break the child just to watch us weep. He goes. William, Cole had replied, his voice heavy with the exhaustion of a dying species. Or they glass London tomorrow, put a biosuit on him, pump him full of Boston Dynamics gravity stimulants. Just get his biometric signature on that treaty. And so Leo Garrison walked the obsidian halls of the Valyrian palace. He was a quiet boy, small for his age, with pale skin and dark, observant eyes. He wore a standard issue UN diplomatic suit, modified with a heavy cervical collar and joint braces to compensate for the crushing gravity of the alien home world. While Hayes and General Brooks sweated profusely under the intense atmospheric pressure, Leo walked with an eerie, silent rhythm. He rarely spoke, he just watched. The grand throne room of Ethelberg was less a diplomatic chamber and more a gladiatorial arena. Towering pillars of basalt and gold reached up to a vaulted ceiling where captured enemy banners hung like rotting leaves. Emperor Kale sat upon a throne, carved from the hull of a dreadnought, his massive armored frame radiating casual malice. Surrounding him were hundreds of Galarian elite warlords, grand viziers and vassal kings from a dozen subjugated species. Ambassador Hayes, Emperor Kale's voice boomed through the chamber, translated seamlessly by the neural implants every diplomat was forced to wear. You come to us broken, you come to us crawling. It is the natural order of the cosmos. The weak are consumed by the strong. We come to negotiate the survival of our species. Emperor Hayes said, keeping his voice steady despite the sweat stinging his eyes. We have agreed to your territorial demands. We will cede the Typhon sector. We ask only for the preservation of Earth and her immediate lunar colonies. Kale laughed, a sound like grinding tectonic plates. You ask. You are in no position to ask for anything human. You are an inferior breed. Your bones are brittle, your muscles are pathetic, your lifespan is a fleeting joke. You only exist because I have not yet grown tired of your desperate scrambling. The Emperor leaned forward, his reptilian eyes locking onto the small braced figure of Leo Garrison. And this is the blood heir of Typhon. This fragile shivering insect. Kale sneered, the contempt dripping from every syllable. This is the legacy of the humans who dared to defy my fleets. General Brooks stepped slightly in front of Leo, his hand twitching toward a sidearm he wasn't allowed to carry. The boy is here to satisfy your laws. Emperor, let us sign the treaty and be done with this. The treaty will be signed, Kale rumbled, but first we must observe the right of the anvil. It is our custom to test the worth of a subjugated race, to see what labor they are fit for in my mines. The Emperor raised a massive, gauntleted hand. At the center of the arena floor, a massive circular platform began to rise. From the depths of the palace, the sheer mechanical grinding of the gears shook the floorboards beneath Hayes' feet. As the platform locked into place, the room fell dead silent. Resting on a pedestal of solid diamond was a weapon of unfathomable proportions. It was a warhammer, but one so absurdly massive it defied all architectural logic. Its head was a block of dull, light-absorbing metal, roughly the size of a standard shipping container. The handle was a thick pillar of braided carbon steel. Behold, Kale announced. The Starbreaker, forged from the collapsed core of a neutron star, laced with gravimetric dampeners just to keep it from cracking the planet's crust. Its undampened mass is exactly 500 metric tons. By our laws, any species that can lift the Starbreaker from its cradle earns the right to self-governance. Those who cannot are fit only to kneel. Hayes felt his stomach drop. It was a rigged game, a cruel theatrical display designed to crush whatever lingering hope the human race had left. The sheer physics of the Starbreaker made the Emperor's challenge an impossible farce. 500 metric tons is the equivalent of a fully loaded Boeing 747 airliner condensed into a weapon no larger than a small truck, even if a creature possessed the muscular strength to lift it. The biomechanical leverage required would shatter their own skeletal structure, and the concentrated pressure of their feet would punch right through the floor. It was a weapon meant to be wielded by mechanized dreadnoughts or anti-gravity siege engines, not flesh and blood. Yet this was the Valyrian way. It was a psychological weapon more than a physical one, by presenting an impossible task framed as a fair opportunity. The Empire broke the spirit of their conquered foes before fitting them with chains. Let the vassal races demonstrate. Emperor Kale bellowed. From the shadows of the arena, a massive creature was brought forth. It was a Groxian, a species of hulking rhinoceron behemoths that served as the Ascendancy's shock troops. The Groxian stood 12 ft tall, its arms thicker than oak trees corded with veins that pumped bioluminescent blue blood. This is Commander Corveth. Kale sneered down at the human delegation. His species surrendered to us a century ago. Watch, humans, and understand your place. Corveth approached the diamond pedestal. The ground trembled beneath his immense weight. He wrapped his massive, four-fingered hands around the braided steel handle of the Starbreaker. He planted his feet, let out a deafening roar, and pulled. The sound of straining muscle and cracking cartilage echoed through the silent chamber. Corveth roared in agony, his blue veins bulging until they threatened to burst through his thick hide. The hammer did not move, not a single millimeter. After 30 seconds of excruciating effort, a sickening snap rang out. Corveth's left arm gave way, the bone fracturing under the immense counterforce. The behemoth collapsed to his knees, clutching his ruined limb, panting in shame. A valiant effort, Kale mocked, waving a hand dismissively. Remove him. He will serve in the lower radioactive levels for his failure. Hayes watched in horror as the giant alien was dragged away. He turned to General Brooks, whispering furiously, "This is insane. It's a localized gravity well. I can feel the pull from here. If a 12 ft shock trooper can't even budget, how can he expect us to even try? It's a public execution of our dignity." "That's exactly what it is, William," Brooks muttered grimly, his jaw clenched. "He wants footage of us straining and failing to broadcast across the solar system. He wants Earth to see us broken before the invasion ships land." And now Emperor Kale's voice cut through their whispers, thick with sadistic glee. "We come to the humans, the mighty warriors who thought they could hold the Orion arm. Ambassador Hayes, step forward and claim your species' right to freedom." Hayes swallowed hard. He was a diplomat, a man of 55 with a bad knee and a mild heart condition. But he was also the representative of Earth. He adjusted his suit jacket, stood as tall as the 1.4G environment would allow, and walked slowly toward the pedestal. As he neared the Starbreaker, the sheer oppressive aura of the weapon hit him. It was cold, unnaturally so, sucking the ambient heat from the air. Hayes reached out, his frail, trembling hands gripping the braided steel handle. It was like gripping the roots of a mountain. He didn't even try to lift it. He knew better. He simply stood there for a long moment, hands on the weapon, projecting an image of calm defiance. Then he let go, took a step back, and looked up at the Emperor. "I cannot lift it," Hayes said, his voice ringing out clear and steady. "I do not possess the strength. My species is not built for this. We are builders, thinkers, and explorers. We are not weapons, a murmur rippled through the alien court. Some laughed, others seemed disappointed by the lack of a struggle. Kale slammed his fist against the armrest of his throne. Cowardice, you do not even attempt to struggle, you simply accept your pathetic nature. I accept reality, Emperor, Hayes countered, respectfully but firmly. I have satisfied your right. I attempted the challenge and failed. Now let us sign the treaty so my people can live. The Emperor's eyes narrowed into slits. A vicious, calculating light danced within them. He looked past Hayes, scanning the human delegation until his gaze landed on the small, braced figure standing quietly in the back. No, Kale whispered, the sound amplified by the room's acoustics. You do not get to choose the champion. Ambassador, the right demands that the highest-ranking bloodline of the contested territory must attempt the lift. The Typhon sector is what you bargain with, therefore the heir of Typhon must take the test. The room froze. General Brooks instinctively dropped his hand to his empty holster. Hayes felt the blood drain from his face. Emperor, be reasonable, Hayes pleaded, stepping forward, abandoning diplomatic protocol. He's just a child, a 12-year-old boy. The gravity of this room alone is straining his heart. If he tries to lift that mass, it will tear his arms from their sockets. You already have our surrender. The law is the law, Kale roared, standing from his throne, towering over the assembly. The boy claims ownership of Typhon. Let the boy prove he has the strength to hold it. Or do you admit that human laws are as fragile as your human bodies? The Emperor pointed a massive clawed finger directly at Leo Garrison. Come forward, child, Kale commanded, his voice dripping with venom. Come and bear the weight of your dead world, William. Hayes moved to block the boy, his diplomatic veneer completely shattered. I won't allow it. We will void the treaty. We will fight to the last man on earth before I let you torture a child for your amusement. General Brooks stepped up beside Hayes, his posture rigid, preparing for the Valyrian guards to strike them down. It was over. Humanity was going to burn, but they would not let this monster break a child on galactic television. William, the voice was soft, barely a whisper, yet it cut through the rising tension in the room like a scalpel. Hayes turned. Leo Garrison was stepping forward. The boy's face was completely devoid of terror. There were no tears in his eyes, no trembling in his small hands. He looked up at Hayes with an expression of profound, unsettling calm. It's okay, Mr. Hayes, Leo said quietly. Leo, no, Hayes whispered, dropping to one knee to look the boy in the eyes. You don't understand. That thing is locked to a gravity well. If you pull on it, the kinetic feedback will crush your spine. I know what it is, Leo replied. He reached up to the heavy mechanical cervical collar strapped around his neck. The Boston Dynamics gravity compensator that was supposed to be keeping him alive in the 1.4G environment. With a sharp click, Leo unlatched it. The heavy metal collar fell to the floor with a loud clang. Hayes gasped, expecting the boy to collapse under the crushing atmospheric pressure, but Leo didn't fall. He rolled his shoulders, a strange popping sound echoing from his joints. He reached down and unbuckled the leg braces, kicking them aside. The alien courtiers began to murmur in confusion. Even Emperor Kale leaned forward, his brow furrowed. What is the meaning of This, Cal demanded, is the child, trying to hasten his own death. What the Emperor did not know, what the Valyrian intelligence networks had utterly failed to uncover in their conquest of the Typhon sector, was the true nature of the human mining colonies. Typhon Prime was not a normal planet, it was a rogue hyperdense super-Earth, subjected to gravitational forces exceeding 15 times that of Earth's norm for 4 generations. The Garrison family and the miners of Typhon had not just survived there, they had adapted. But normal adaptation wasn't enough. Decades ago, under a classified black book project funded by the UN and Raytheon biomed, the colonists were subjected to aggressive genetic rewriting. Their skeletal structures were laced with carbon nanotube matrices. Their muscle fibers were dense, hyperoxygenated, and capable of generating explosive kinetic output. Leo Garrison wasn't wearing the gravity braces on Ethelred to keep himself standing up, he was wearing them to hold himself down, to hide what the Typhon colonists had become. He's just a child, Emperor Cal sneered, though a hint of uncertainty now laced his voice as the boy walked normally, almost lightly, toward the pedestal. Leo stopped in front of the Starbreaker. To him, the massive block of dark metal didn't look like a weapon of gods. It looked like the core drills his father used to haul out of the deep crust mines. Back home, the boy looked at his hands, then looked up at the Emperor. My father told me about weapons like this, Leo said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the silent arena. Kinetic reactive mass. The harder you pull, the heavier it gets. It fights back. It is forged from a star insect. Cal spat. It will break you only if you fight it with anger, Leo replied softly. He didn't take a wide, aggressive stance like the Groxian champion had. He didn't roar. Leo simply stepped close to the diamond pedestal, slid his small, pale hands around the thick braided steel of the handle, and closed his eyes. For a moment nothing happened. The court held its breath, waiting for the gruesome sound of the child's bones snapping. Instead, a low subsonic hum began to vibrate through the floor. It started as a vibration in the soles of William Hayes's shoes, then the diamond pedestal began to emit a high-pitched whine. The gravimetric dampeners inside the hammer were screaming, trying to compensate for an influx of force they were not programmed to handle. Leo wasn't just pulling upward. Typhon biomodifications allowed his nervous system to generate localized bioelectric fields, a necessary adaptation for operating heavy machinery in a 15G environment without being crushed by the magnetic backlash. He was interfacing with the hammer's quantum lock, overriding its mass dampeners through sheer biomechanical resonance. The boy inhaled slowly. The muscles beneath his thin UN suit didn't bulge, they compacted, hardening into something denser than steel. Crack. It wasn't the boy's bones, it was the solid diamond pedestal. A hairline fracture appeared right beneath the head of the Starbreaker. Emperor Kale stood up from his throne, his eyes wide with disbelief. Impossible, Leo exhaled. And he lifted the 500-ton Warhammer, the Anvil of Stars, the weapon that had broken the arms of giants and crushed the spirits of 100 species. Moved. It rose an inch, then a foot. The sound was deafening. The sheer density of the hammer interacting with the boy's hyperdense Molecular structure created a localized gravity shear. The air around Leo shimmered and warped like heat rising off asphalt. The titanium floorboards beneath Leo's feet began to groan, warping inward, forming a shallow crater. As the boy became the fulcrum for 500 metric tons of dead star mass, with a smooth, fluid motion that defied every law of physics the Valyrian Empire held sacred, Leo hoisted the hammer off the pedestal entirely. He brought the shaft down, resting the massive blocky head of the weapon against his shoulder, holding it as casually as a peasant boy might hold a wooden staff. The entire throne room descended into absolute paralyzing silence. Not a single alien breathed. General Brooks's jaw was hanging open. William Hayes forgot how to blink. Leo turned slowly, the floor beneath him cracking with every pivot of his foot. He looked directly at Emperor Kale, who was now gripping the railing of his balcony so hard the metal was bending. "It's a bit heavy," Leo said, his voice perfectly calm, though his eyes burned with the cold, unyielding gravity of a typhoon winter. And GT snorts. And GT, but I think I can carry it. The boy took a step forward, the floor shattering under the combined weight. "Now," Leo Garrison said to the ruler of 1,000 worlds, "about that treaty." The silence in the throne room of Ethelgard was absolute, broken only by the horrifying metallic shrieks of the palace floor warping under the boy's feet. 12-year-old Leo Garrison stood perfectly still, the 500-ton mass of the Starbreaker resting on his right shoulder, the air around the weapon visibly distorted, the undampened gravitational field bending the ambient light into a hazy corona. To the hundreds of vassal kings, warlords, and alien dignitaries gathered in the Grand Colosseum, reality itself had just ruptured. Their entire socio-political framework was built upon the absolute indisputable doctrine of physical superiority. The Valyrian ascendancy ruled because they were the strongest, and the Starbreaker was the ultimate divine proof of that strength. Now a fragile, pale human child, a species deemed fit only for extermination or slavery, was casually holding their sacred artifact like a garden tool. Emperor Kale's reptilian face drained of its violet pigmentation. His jaw worked silently for a moment before raw primal denial took over. "Deception," Kale roared, his voice cracking with a frantic edge that had never been heard in the obsidian halls. "It is a trick, a human technological illusion. The gravimetric dampeners have been manipulated." William Hayes, who had spent his entire career navigating the treacherous waters of international statecraft, felt a sudden electric shift in the room's dynamics. The Palantir predictive analytics models back at UN Command had run millions of simulations for this summit. Every single one had ended in humanity's subjugation, but the analysts hadn't factored in the Garrison boy, because the UN had classified the Typhon Prime biomodifications so deeply that even the Secretary General only knew half the truth. "There is no trick, Emperor," Hayes said, his voice suddenly infused with the lethal calm of a man holding a royal flush. "Your hammer operates on quantum-locked mass. You can read the telemetry on your own command gauntlet. The boy is bearing the full undampened weight of 500 metric tons." Kale looked down at his armored wrist. The holographic readouts were flashing a violent crimson. The pedestal sensors confirmed a total mass Displacement, the weapon was live and its weight was entirely supported by the child's biomechanical framework. Kill them, Kale shrieked, all pretense of royal composure evaporating. He pointed a trembling clawed finger at the human delegation. Tear the child apart. Slaughter the diplomats. The writ is void. From the shadows behind the throne, the emperor's royal praetorians surged forward. These were the apex predators of the ascendancy, 8 ft tall, cyborgs encased in reactive ceramic composite armor, wielding plasma glaives capable of cutting through starship hulls. There were 12 of them, and they moved with terrifying synchronized speed. General William Brooks finally drew the sidearm he had smuggled past the orbital scanners, heavy-duty kinetic magnum, but before he could even disengage the safety, Leo moved. The boy did not swing the Starbreaker at the approaching guards. To swing a 500-ton object with any real velocity would require leverage that would simply rip the floor out from beneath him. Instead, Leo shifted his stance, his carbon nanotube-laced skeletal structure locking into a rigid, unyielding pillar, and simply tipped the head of the hammer forward, letting gravity do the work. He let the massive block of neutron star metal drop exactly 3 ft, slamming it onto the titanium floor in front of him before catching the braided steel handle to arrest its fall. The physical impact was apocalyptic. When 500 tons of hyperdense mass strikes a rigid surface in a 1.4 G environment, the kinetic energy does not simply dissipate, it acts like a localized seismic bomb. The titanium floorboards shattered like spun glass, a visible shockwave of compressed air blasted outward in a perfect ring, moving at the speed of sound. The 12 Royal Praetorians, charging at full sprint, hit the shockwave. Their reactive armor, designed by the Ascendancy's finest engineers to withstand artillery fire, was completely useless against a wall of pure kinetic displacement. The guards were thrown backward through the air like discarded dolls, their armor crumpling inward. They smashed into the basalt pillars of the throne room, the sickening crunch of alien bone echoing loudly. They slumped to the ground, unconscious or dead, their plasma glaive skittering uselessly across the ruined floor. The shockwave hit the human delegation too, but General Brooks and Ambassador Hayes were shielded by the localized gravity eddy created by Leo's immediate proximity to the hammer. They merely felt the wind violently snap their clothing. The rest of the throne room was utterly devastated. Tapestries were ripped from the walls. The vassal kings in the front rows were thrown to the floor, bleeding from their ears. Leo stood amidst the cratered ruin of the diplomatic floor, the head of the hammer resting easily against the cracked titanium. He hadn't even broken a sweat. I wouldn't send any more guards, Emperor, Leo said, his voice echoing in the stunned silence. He looked down at the floor, then back up at the throne. The architectural schematics of this palace are publicly available in your orbital data banks. You built this citadel over the Ethelgard primary tectonic fault line to harness geothermal energy. It was a very efficient design. The boy casually wrapped both hands around the handle of the Starbreaker. But Leo continued, his dark eyes locking onto Kale's terrified face. If I let go of this handle and let the undampened core of a neutron star drop freely onto this weakened floor, it will punch straight through the crust. It will hit the fault line, according to my father's mining calculations. The resulting seismic event will trigger a magnitude 14 earthquake. It will crack your continent in half and drop this entire palace into the planetary mantle. General Brooks lowered his magnum, staring at the 12-year-old boy with a mixture of absolute awe and sheer terror. "Good God," he whispered. William Hayes, however, smiled. It was a cold, predatory smile. He stepped forward, carefully navigating the shattered floorboards to stand beside Leo. "He's a mining heir," Emperor Hayes said smoothly. "The Garrison family has spent 4 generations cracking open hyperdense celestial bodies. He knows exactly how to break a planet. And currently, he is the only thing holding yours together. The power dynamic of the entire Orion arm shifted. In a matter of seconds, the vassal kings recovering from the blast looked from the human child to their emperor. They saw a god bleeding. They saw Kale gripping his throne in paralyzed fear. The absolute authority of the Valyrian ascendancy was dissolving in real time. You are insane," Kale stammered, his voice stripped of its booming resonance. "If he drops the hammer, you humans will die as well. You will burn in the mantle. With us, we're already dead, Kale." General Brooks growled, stepping up beside Hayes. "Your fleets are blockading Earth. Our people are starving. You promised us extinction. If we burn today, we take the heart of the Valyrian Empire with us. I'd call that a tactical victory." Leo didn't say a word. He just stood there, the weight of the hammer anchoring him to the floor. His face an unreadable mask of Typhon stone. He adjusted his grip, letting the hammer slip perhaps half an inch. The floor groaned ominously, deep structural vibration that rattled the teeth of everyone in the room. Kale threw up his hands, pressing himself back into his throne. Stop the boy. Do not let it fall. Then let us talk about the treaty," Hayes said, reaching into his suit jacket and withdrawing the digital date slate containing Earth's unconditional surrender. With a flick of his thumb, he deleted the document. "The Typhon sector is no longer on the table," Hayes announced, his voice carrying the authority of a newly minted superpower. "By your own laws, Emperor laws, you so graciously reminded us of today. Any species that lifts the Starbreaker earns the right to absolute self-governance. The right of the anvil is complete. Humanity is no longer a subjugated race. We are your equals." Kale's eyes darted frantically around the room. He looked to his grand viziers, but they were backing away, their heads bowed. Valyrian law was absolute. To deny the right was to deny the foundation of their religion and their empire. If Kale ordered his fleets to fire now, his own vassal states would rebel, citing religious heresy. Kale choked on the word. "You demand equality based on a genetic anomaly. I demand you withdraw your fleets from the solar system within 24 Earth hours," Hayes dictated, pacing in front of the crater. "I demand immediate humanitarian aid, synthesized proteins, medical supplies, and atmospheric scrubbers delivered to Earth and Mars. I demand the return of all prisoners of war, and if I refuse..." Kale spat, a last remnant of defiance flaring in his chest. "You cannot hold that mass forever. Child, your muscles will fail, your heart will burst, and when you die the hammer drops and we all perish. It is a stalemate." Strange hollow laugh echoed through the Chamber. It took everyone a moment to realize it. Came from Leo Garrison, my father Leo. Said quietly, the humor fading into a chilling seriousness, was a master engineer for Northrop Grumman's Deep Core Division. Before the war, when your fleets bombarded Typhon Prime, you used thermal barrack weapons, you glassed the surface, we eradicated the colony. Kale said defensively, you eradicated the atmosphere, Leo corrected. Typhon Prime is a 15G world we didn't live on. The surface, Emperor, we lived 50 miles down in the hyperpressurized mantle. Strata, your bombs barely scratched the paint on our blast doors. Hayes looked at Leo, genuine surprise flickering across his face. Even the UN didn't know this. The intelligence reports had declared Typhon Prime a total loss. There are 4 million biomodified human miners still alive beneath the surface of Typhon. Leo revealed, his voice echoing like the tolling of a bell. 4 million people with my bone density. 4 million people who bench press mining equipment the size of your drop ships. Just to clear a tunnel, they've been waiting down there in the dark for 3 years, wondering when the UN was going to send a ship to pick them up. Leo looked directly into Kale's eyes. If you don't sign Mr. Hayes' new treaty, my people won't need starships to fight. We will let you land on Typhon. We will let you march your little armored guards into our tunnels. And then we will rip them apart with our bare hands. The bluff, if it even was a bluff, was masterful. The image of 4 million superdense, indestructible humans lurking in the subterranean dark of a high-gravity world was enough to make the Valyrian warlords visibly shudder. The psychological warfare that Kale had attempted to inflict upon the humans had been turned back upon him, magnified 1,000-fold. Sign the treaty, Emperor, Hayes commanded gently, or the boy drops the hammer. Kale looked at the Starbreaker. He looked at the cracked floor. He looked at the faces of his terrified subjects. Finally, the warlord who had burned 1,000 worlds slumped in his throne, utterly defeated by a 12-year-old boy. Draft the terms, Kale whispered, his voice broken. The blockade will be lifted. It took 2 hours to finalize the new accords. During that entire time, Leo Garrison did not move. He stood as a silent sentinel, his hands wrapped around the braided steel, holding the tectonic fate of the alien throne world hostage. General Brooks stood by his side, watching the boys' vitals on a portable scanner, marveling at the fact that the child's heart rate had barely elevated above a resting pace when the final biometric seals were affixed to the new treaty of Ethelgard, effectively ending the Iran war and cementing Earth as a sovereign, untouchable power. Hayes nodded to Leo. It's done, son, Hayes said softly. We're going home. Leo let out a slow breath. Good, I'm tired. He didn't drop the hammer. To do so would still trigger the earthquake. Instead, with a grunt of exertion that finally showed the monumental effort he was putting forth, Leo hoisted the 500-ton mass back up. He pivoted on his heels, the floor groaning one last time, and stepped toward the cracked diamond pedestal. With pinpoint precision, he lowered the Starbreaker back into its cradle. The high-pitched whine of the gravimetric dampeners engaged the machine, screaming as it accepted the burden once more. The heavy, oppressive aura of the weapon faded as the quantum locks engaged. Leo dusted off his hands. He looked at the deep grooves left in his palms by the braided steel, then shoved his hands into his pockets. He walked past the stunned, silent ranks of the Valyrian elite. He walked past the broken bodies of the Praetorian guards. He didn't look up at the Emperor. He simply followed William Hayes and General Brooks out of the Grand Colosseum, a small boy in a slightly oversized UN diplomatic suit. When they finally reached the landing pad where their shuttle waited, the crushing 1.4 G atmosphere of Ethelgard still pressing down on them, General Brooks put a heavy hand on Leo's shoulder. "Son," the general said, his voice thick with emotion, "I have served with the bravest men and women in the galaxy, but I have never seen anything like what you did today. You saved Earth. You saved all of us." Leo looked up at the general, a small, tired smile touching his lips. "They called us insects, General," Leo said, quietly, looking out at the alien sky. "My dad always told me, even an insect can carry 50 times its own weight if it has to. The Valyrians just didn't know how heavy we could be." The human shuttle launched into the atmosphere, leaving the throne world behind. The universe had shifted on its axis, not by the fire of 1,000 dreadnoughts, but by the quiet strength of a child who refused to let his people be broken. The Orion War was over, and humanity, with the gravity of 100 worlds in their bones, was just getting started. Thank you for tuning into this legendary chapter of humanity's survival. If Leo's jaw-dropping defiance and the brilliant tactical mind of Earth's diplomats kept you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button and share this video with a friend who loves epic HFY sci-fi. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss out on the greatest stories in the galaxy. Until next time, remember, never underestimate human gravity. And GT. Hi, my name is Tran Truong, the owner and manager of Palace Truths. After watching the video, he's just a child. The Empress sneered. Then the human boy lifted the 500-ton warhammer. I'd really like to know what you think. How this story make you feel? What I enjoyed most about this story was the sense of surprise and determination. It takes a character who is underestimated from the very beginning and turns expectations upside down. Those moments when someone proves they're capable of far more than others believe always make for a satisfying HFI adventure. One gentle lesson I took from the story is that appearances can be misleading. Age, size, or status don't always tell us what a person is capable of achieving. In everyday life, it's worth giving people a chance before deciding what they can or cannot do. What was your favorite moment in the story, and do you think the Emperor learned anything from what happened? Thank you for spending time with Palace Truths. If this story made you smile or kept you hooked until the end, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments, and maybe like or subscribe for more HFI stories and sci-fi adventures.